Hey there, and welcome to the Overcomers Overcoming Podcast. It is great to have you join us. This podcast series features those who have gained victory over a life encounter. With that life experience, we encourage those who are experiencing something that might seem to be insurmountable. We advance and encourage others by passing forward evaluated life experiences. We have 3 objectives in this podcast series. We want to encourage those who are engaged in any type of life encounter by offering to walk with you to help you gain victory over anything that might seem impossible. We want to share our experience to help you. Our second objective is to help you develop a confident resolve that there are multiple options to get past any life obstacle. It's a matter of thinking into the situation. Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you are facing a dilemma resulting from a previous decision you wish you could reverse, we want to help you think into all of the facts and factors involved in making an informed decision. I'm Ron Cooper, founder of the Cooper Culture. I'm with my wife and business manager, Marty. Together, we are the Cooper Culture Company, who is sponsoring this podcast series. Today, we feature Lois Letchford for a second episode, where she continues explaining to our listeners how she adapted to Nicholas, her son, and what he was told was ostensibly a learning disability, but she worked also through her dyslexia, and the two of them worked very effectively together. She has adapted to Nicholas's learning style, and it's very interesting. She explains how, I'm going to use the term interactive learning, that is, as we are able to interact with those who are learning, we can make learning fun and we can help them understand the total concepts around what is visual, what is happening in the learning process. Marty, I'm captivated by this podcast series. What can our listeners gain from Lois?
Ron, Lois is amazing how she took Nicholas and helped him go through school and made learning fun for him. She can be a help to and an encouragement to others that are struggling, working with their children, and just being an inspiration. So listening to this podcast for someone that needs the help will be very encouraging.
Let's listen and learn together. There'll be more episodes to follow. Lois, thank you so much for rejoining us for a second episode where we can learn about Nicholas, some of his past, what you and your husband are enduring in terms of learning Nicholas. And it seems, Lois, you have learned to adapt, albeit it possibly is a journey that you're always learning, you and your husband. But our listeners need to know just how it was that you feel you first learned about Nicholas, his learning style, adapting to, and there may be an attention expand and so forth. Whatever it is, Lois, our listeners need to know about your experience. You have so much we can learn from that there are many people who do not, in my opinion, and I'm here I am an aerospace engineer. I'm not no medical degree, but it is my firm conviction everybody can learn, but we're sometimes told by other people in the context of words have meaning. If we're told we cannot learn, there's some sort of learning disability, some of us tend to believe that. Lois, good to have you back with us. Thank you for the opportunity to learn more about you and Nicholas.
Hello, Ron and Marty. I'm delighted to be here and share my experience and my knowledge, as you said, that just continues to grow. I haven't finished learning yet. The story of Nicholas, for me, is quite phenomenal because it happened by mistake. He failed first grade in Brisbane, Australia. He went on to the second grade with the support of a reading teacher. And the reading teacher was doing the normal, teaching letters and sounds, teaching sight words, and she was sending him home 20 sight words with 2 sentences per sight word, standardized sentences. And all I knew is that Nicholas made minimal progress. And then at the second half of 1995, our family had the opportunity to move to another country. And with that, you have an exploration available, a time window that you can say, let's try something. So, and we went, in fact, to Oxford, England. And I took with me a series of books called Success for All. Well, the title tells you everything. Every child is going to read by using this series. I failed, my son failed, and I was no better than the first grade teacher. You know, once you've got to that point of this is not working, what else do I do? And I had my mother-in-law with me, and she said, Lois, put away what's not working and make learning fun. That comment allowed me to throw out the books and then let's start again. And I thought, what can he do? So I'm looking then at his strengths. He can read words. He can rhyme words, and he can see patterns. He was very good at pattern recognition. And that was my starting point. So what can he do? I can write a poem for him. And once I wrote that first poem and worked with him on that poem, my teaching changed, his learning changed. The stress went out the window. One success. I remember in my mind, I can still go back to that day in 1995 because I was exhausted after teaching him. But he could do it. And he was happy. The stress levels, his stress levels had plummeted to, this is okay. And then he did the illustration. And it was, this is even better. And once you've got one success, you build on that success. Now, Nicholas has got extraordinary concentration. He is not ADD. And that also played into it. So once I wrote one poem and the next and the next and the next, I was seeing Nicholas's thinking just grow. And then we are in Oxford. If you're in a place, this blows my mind where we were. We're in a place that has access to the world's documents. And as I wrote and wrote and wrote and then wrote about Captain Cook, the last of the great explorers, Nicholas says to me, can I see Captain Cook's original maps? Now, if I was in any other place in the world at that time, it would have been, no, we're not in a place where we could find them. We're in a place where we have access to original documents. We're in a place that's got map shops on various corners in the city. And so there's not only the writing and the reading going on, there was an experience. And that experience lasted Nicholas a lifetime.
Lois, I'm intrigued with everything you're saying. There are several things that come to mind that maybe our listeners are thinking the same thing. This is not working. We cannot continue doing what we have done. Make learning fun. You impress me as the kind of person who will never give up. Lois, will continue to explore to find something that works. You learn from Nicholas that he has extraordinary concentration. We firmly believe, as you did, build on successes, maybe develop small wins, and you build on that to develop confidence. In the context of original documents, does Nicholas have a strong propensity for history? Am I reading too much into that?
No, absolutely right. An absolute love of history. And what's fascinating is I spoke to Nicholas after he graduated with his PhD, and I asked him about first grade, and he cried. And, we recognized there's a problem here that I hadn't dealt with. And then I said, well, tell me about your learning with me in 1995. And he repeated the poems that I had written originally. 25 years later, he repeated those poems. That's learning on a scale that's beyond comprehension to me. And then he said to me, and learning about mapping taught me to love learning, and I never want to stop learning. And then he said something else. He said, you wrote a poem about a witch's spell. And he starts giggling, I couldn't get over it. And he said, and I wrote the ingredients to the spell. And he's roaring with laughter like he was 20-something years ago. And I said, I did. We did all that. And what I learned was that when we give kids something that they love, it's not just about learning letters and sounds, but there's an emotion that lasts them a lifetime. This poem about a witch's spell, I knew he loved. You won't find it in my book, Reversed, a memoir, at all, because I deemed my poem too poor to write about. And yet, what's Nicholas remembering 20 plus years later was this silly poem about a witch's spell, and he wrote the ingredients, and we put the ingredients in 2 drops of bird poo, a bottle of a bottle of magic spell, 3 stinky rats' tails, and and the list went on and on and on. And it was, to me, just so funny that that's what he remembered. That was powerful to me. Yeah, there's another point about the learning, that when Nicholas failed so badly, I then turned to my learning and worked out I had scraped my way through school with no diagnosis of a learning disability. And for the first time in my life, I'm reading about dyslexia and the symptoms, and I am seeing myself. And I could go back and look at my history and say, well, I could read words I couldn't comprehend. No one picked it up. I worked incredibly hard at every level just to pass. And when I was doing anatomy, at one section, our professor brought in a box of bones. And when he started touching and pointing, my learning changed dramatically. And I am seeing my strengths and my weaknesses and how I learned. And I took that knowledge and I put it then to Nicholas.
I'm fascinated. Our listeners are fascinated. You learned yourself. You learned Nicholas. You each adapted to each other. There's some people who use the term, and I'm wondering if you agree with this, Nicholas had an extraordinary ability to concentrate. Some people might use the term photographic memory. In other words, they can remember details that some people could not or think they cannot. Is it fair to use that term photographic memory in the context of Nicholas?
I honestly don't know. I know. Now, this is what happened throughout his life. When he was 21 and he's doing an honours degree in mathematics, I knew he had to write. And I thought he needs to be tested and we need to get him to some support to write this at this level. The testing showed that he was on the 99th percentile of pattern recognition and spatial awareness. The testing also showed he's in the bottom 5% and even 1% of phonemic awareness and language-based skills. So you've got this extraordinary gap between his strengths and weaknesses, 1% to 99%. That's not normal.
Very important what you just said, Lois. You had Nicholas tested, and from a mother and father's perspective, did you ostensibly acknowledge the strengths and just accept the weaknesses? We will build on the strengths and just acknowledge the weaknesses, but we will move on with what we can build on. Was there a mindset, something like that?
I didn't realize his weaknesses were so low, and I didn't know his strengths were so high. It's critical to be successful to look at those strengths and know that they have to learn to read irrespective. I've said that wrong. It's to look at the weaknesses, and irrespective of the weaknesses, we still have to teach that child to read. That's the one that's critical. And the problem is when we look at the weaknesses of Nicholas, it's so easy to say this child will never read. Instead of, how are we going to teach a child who sits on the first percentile? You're an aerospace engineer. You understand mathematics. You understand percentiles. Many people don't. The way we teach our children impacts them for life. And even though he is still on the first percentile, he reads slowly. His ability, his memory for language blows my mind. And here's another component of the story. We moved from Brisbane, Australia to Oxford in 1995. We went back to Brisbane. And then in 1999, we moved to Lubbock, Texas. Now, Lubbock, Texas is the place in the middle of nowhere. The libraries in Lubbock are full of books on CDs, or CD at the time. Today it'll be whatever we call it. When we travelled, we listened to books on CD. Nicholas was the first one to say, what have we got to listen to? Don't talk in the car. I'm listening to the book. If you have a weakness with language, it still needs to grow. When you're listening to books on CD or listening to books, I still have the old language in my mind, don't I? If you're listening to books, you are hearing the language of the best kids in the class. You're being exposed to it. You're not reading little doggy books. You're working with the best. You're hearing it, and we listen to books 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 times so the language becomes embedded in the brain. Then we would go back and reread it. We would sometimes listen to the book and follow along, but sometimes we'd even read a paragraph. Nicholas still reads slowly. The reading speed is irrelevant. His comprehension was the best. So it's a combination of factors that you have to do a lot of things. And there's the other component with Nicholas. Nicholas was compliant. He was desperate to succeed because in his brain, he knew I can do things, but he also knew I'm not good at this. And even though we didn't say it, he knew it in his heart. And it takes a long time for other people to acknowledge this kid is incredible. Does that answer the question?
It does. Now, let me pursue just a little bit further. You mentioned if Nicholas were tested even today, he would still show up low in some categories. And this refers to my previous question, that acknowledging that let's just say that I am tested in the 5th percentile. I might be able to build it up to the 8th or 10th percentile, but likely I'm not going to build it up to the 98th percentile. I'm just acknowledging that's who I am. I'm going to juxtapose also, Lois, that I'm going to guess Nicholas would not be interested in every book available on Audible form. There are just the right books for him that he could resonate with and so forth. And if I'm mischaracterizing, tell me. But here it is. I'm adapting to you who adapted to him, and you selected the right books from which he can gain confidence. Again, small wins is kind of what I'm building up to. I've included an awful lot in that statement, but for those of us who may be working with, for those of us who may have or been told we have some sort of learning disability, hey, let's adapt to it, that nobody is too stupid to learn, and make learning fun. I love that expression. I packed a lot into that, Lois, but you have great insight.
You have, but that's all right. Okay, number one, the book thing. Because the library had so many good books, I picked the books out that we would listen to. If my boys started to fight in the car, the book wasn't good. Take it off, listen to something else. And you're right, the best books were the winners. Some made us cry, some made us laugh. But we had a variety and we had a selection. The person who's reading the book made a difference too. And I can still tell you, the Aliens Ate My Homework audio version, read by one person, you would never know it because the voice variation and the characters, I still have those characters in my head now. So that's how it was. And so when he was a kid, he listened to a wide range of books. But you're right, the moment we didn't like them, we turned it off and we put on something else. Judy Blume we didn't like. It was a bit slow, but the Redwall series gobbled it up. So, and he reads a variety of things today. I think is doing a lot more technical reading today than anything else, and that takes over. And he says, when I listen to an audiobook, I can't do anything else. It's got to have my complete focus. So that's audiobooks. Okay, now you asked a phenomenal question about his adult life. My son Nicholas is married, and he has married this most amazing lady. She's Indian. She reads at the speed of light, so they complement each other. When Nicholas has an interview to do, Nicholas and his wife practice the questions, his responses, so that he can then go to that interview with confidence. She supports him in the way that I supported Nicholas as a child. And when Nicholas and she were first married and there was a big problem with his work, she called me up one day and I saw her name come up and I thought, oh, what's happened? And she was in tears and she said, Lois, I feel so alone. I'm on this journey alone. The learning disability doesn't go away. We live with it. And I think I didn't have the support that Nicholas has got. It takes more effort on the part of the partner. And in fact, the book that I am writing now, my second book, involves a lot of what's happened to Nicholas as an adult. And his choice of partner in life blows my mind because she is supportive. She could have ditched him and said, this is too hard for me, which would have put Nicholas in a different basket. You don't have the support. You can't apply for jobs when someone's not rereading your application letter and helping you go through these steps like she has done. I mean, it is a lifelong issue, particularly when you've got these extremes, you know, the strengths and weaknesses that Nicholas faces. Most people do not face such extremes. Does that answer your question?
It does, and Marty has a question I want her to ask. Here's a quick summary, Lois. Adapt to everyone's learning style. Everybody has a learning style, and when we choose to go through whatever we have to do to learn that learning style, everybody can learn when it's fun, and you help them develop that interest, and it's always adapting to. Lois, I'm absolutely intrigued with your explanation, your son, how you adapted, his wife. I'm absolutely intrigued. Marty, I'm taking time here.
Lois, I'm going to go back to your book. I love the chapter that you wrote about Nicholas. I think there was a play at school. He came home and he quoted the whole play. And so I'm asking, at that time, what did you recognize in Nicholas?
He could do it. He had a memory. That was my first. You know, the second, the most important for me is that how we teach in the classroom impacts every single child. No one in that classroom, in that teaching situation, would have recognized the power of doing a play to include every child. You know, he didn't have a major part in it. He was in the chorus. But because you're acting it out, you're connecting the oral language with the written language, you're giving the child the words and the action. The things we do in the classroom impacts how our children learn. And what do I do now? The first thing I do is act out my stories. I get parents to do it. I get teachers to do it. And part of it comes from what happened in Nicholas in first grade.
That is fabulous. As we learn the full meaning of act out, I don't know that every person would need that, but we need to learn how to do that such that we're willing to adapt to. Lois, I'm intrigued.
Well, you're right. And see, what acting out does, it engages children's emotions. You're not only doing the voice, but you've got the action, you've got the children laughing. And I did a play when I was teaching in Hobart, with my students. And 12 months, 18 months after we had done this play, one of the girls came up to me and she said, I wasn't one of the people selected to do the play and perform it, but I will never forget doing this play in class. The learning that happens when children are engaged cannot be gauged by a standardized test. Right. And I think that's a critical moment, that learning is much bigger than just doing a test and writing the answers down. And our kids, they're at the beginning of their life. We've got to give them everything in learning, that learning is of value, that learning can be fun. And when you learn that, the books I choose to do these plays with, the language in them is unbelievable. They wouldn't be reading it in a standardized text, but you're reading it in a story that makes you laugh. They remember it for life. And there's a jump in learning that is unanticipated.
Learning can be fun and very effective when you're totally engaged with the emotions, the pictures, everything going on in the communication. When that occurs, learning occurs, and the interaction is what brings about that learning. I want to encourage each of us listening to this to learn from Nicholas, to learn from Lois, how to effectively engage with others as a learning style. The more we effectively engage to interact with them, the greater the learning ability, the greater the opportunity to engage in learning being fun. It is an opportunity for us to share in the enjoyment in someone else's life. I absolutely endorse what you're saying. Just through life experience, SATs, other standardized aptitude tests, we come up with whatever score that does not necessarily identify who we are. But there's some people who say, well, I don't know what else there is. Well, I think there's some of us who have learning abilities that are not necessarily captured accurately on various testing, and I'm not an expert to know what does validate our learning ability. Again, Lois, I'm just absolutely intrigued because everybody, I believe, can learn. I do not like the term learning disability. It is a matter of adapting to. Everybody can learn. I'm absolutely believing that when we do whatever we need to do to, again, I'm going to continuously refer to make learning fun. And when we do, boy, people can engage and totally absorb themselves in it. And I know various people who, man, they're totally absorbed in this. Their comprehension is up in the very high 90% range. That's the way it is. Lois, I applaud you as mom. We haven't spoken with your husband, but I know that he deserves the same amount of credit that you adapted to Nicholas and Kylie. All is well. There's so much everybody can learn through each one of you. And I'm just going to say, I don't know if Nicholas would consent to a podcast either by himself with you, but I want to tell you, I'd be very interested in learning from, and our listeners would, learning from Nicholas's perspective. If he might consider a podcast, we have a lot to learn from the Letchford family.
I would love for his wife to be a part of it too.
Oh, yeah. When I say Letchford family, that's everybody.
She would do it. We'll have to get a time because they now live in Australia. I take my hat off to his wife. She is just amazing. I just love her for all that she does, and she's phenomenal. So who you marry impacts a lot of things too. So
yeah.
Yes, I am a testimony to that. Lois, an expression, hey, I accept you, everything about you, I choose to adapt to you. And when all that's done, there's a number of things that can be achieved. Again, you mentioned build on successes. Boy, I tell you what, you helped make me a believer, and we're going to keep going. I love it. I love your attitude. I love your persistence, your tenacity, and your Brisbanean accent.
Thank you. Well, see, what's interesting with Nicholas, when we lived in Lubbock, we bought Connects, and he built a Sydney Harbour Bridge. Well, he came to me and he said, I'm bored. I said, well, go and build a Sydney Harbour Bridge. Build something. And he built it from his memory, and it was okay. Dad comes home and says, Nick, we've got to do this, this, and this. And it went from being okay to brilliant. And just having that support of someone who can say, you can do it. And then we're building into Nicholas's spatial awareness. And the growth in mathematics is phenomenal. Again, it goes back to what can we experience? Because learning in school, we think of pen and paper is the only way we do it. The more we experience, the greater the learning. And that Connects building put Nicholas's learning on another level. And that's where his mathematics came from. And built into whatever mathematics was there. Because he will tell you, he could not do mathematics in 3rd grade. And I had to do a lot of work at home to help him make the connections to allow him to appear okay in the classroom. So he was the bottom of the class for a long period of time. And moving to Lubbock, Texas, took him from the bottom to the top. He graduated the top 20% of his high school class. Physics, chemistry, mathematics, calculus. I don't know what he did in mathematics, but I know when he went to do his undergraduate degrees, they were amazed at the level of mathematics he had done over the past 3 or 4 years. I see our time ticking away. I just love this conversation with you. I love the questions you're asking. Build on strengths. The weaknesses will be there, but we have to deal with them in a way that is positive. Listening to books on CD, hearing the words at the same rate as your peers, and then coming back to those texts gives you the language, the story structure, the work of the best kids in the class. And that's where our kids belong. They don't want to be reading dumb little books.
Totally, absolutely, radically agree with you, Lois. I'm very interested, and I would like to dedicate a podcast to mathematics. That is one of the core topics we need to learn. How did Nick go from the bottom to the top? I'm going to believe there was a very special way that you and your husband learned how to make that happen. Our listeners need to know, because there's a lot of children, maybe a lot of our listeners, who are not good in math, and what you say might just transform their life. Lois, I want to tell you, our listeners are intrigued. I'm intrigued. I can think already of 3 or 4 more episodes. We need to feature you because you have such a wealth of knowledge that you are instructing. You're giving a lot of people hope just through the vibrance of your voice through this podcast.
Ron and Marty, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for reading the book and recognizing the level of effort that went in. And you're right, I am passionate. So thank you very much.
And we love being with passionate people. And I wish people could see the smile on your face. It all goes together. We're looking forward to continuing this dialogue, Lois.
Lovely. I'll talk to you soon.
Right on. Lois continues her inspiring story in working with, adapting to, and advancing her son, Nicholas. She worked with her husband, Nicholas, who later got married and has a very supportive wife who took a little bit of time to understand her husband, but together they are working to understand, adapt to, and believe in each other. This is an incredibly inspiring story, life experience of how we can, if we choose to, make a very positive situation out of something that some people characterize as negative, some people characterize as long-term, nothing positive is going to happen, but rather, as we choose to adapt, choose to learn, choose to help advance others, we can make this happen. Learning styles are very much an example of this. Some of us are auditory, some of us are visual, some of us are kinesthetic. There's sometimes that learning is just incredibly boring because, and then We fill in the blank with whatever is troubling us, whatever does not match with us, those things that just don't resonate with us. When that happens, learning can be incredibly boring. But when we learn each other's learning styles, when we choose to adapt to that learning style, when we choose to work with and honestly want to have the true grit, if I could use that term, it's a determination to help someone achieve the greatness for which God created them, we'll find it, we'll work it, we'll learn to communicate, we'll learn to do whatever we have to do is through tenacity, perseverance, whatever we need to help advance someone because we want to give at the depth of our heart. And the passionate desire of each of us is to reach out to others to help them achieve the very best, the highest potential they have. It's just inspiring to learn about Nicholas, how Lois and her husband worked with him and helped him to develop his learning styles. It helped him develop a very positive attitude, confidence, mindset. And he has now achieved a doctorate degree from Oxford University. He's amongst the very elite to achieve that level of performance, that level of learning, when at one point early in his life, he was told he had a learning disability and would never be able to achieve what he has achieved. Through perseverance, Lois has given all of us hope that yes, when we choose to adapt, persevere, just keep at it, and have a heart desire to learn, it's through the adaptive learning. And interesting, the audible books that resonated with Nicholas and helped him learn, help him to determine the desire to learn and help that mindset. It's just an incredibly inspiring story with more episodes to follow. As we hopefully hear from Nicholas, we will hear from Lois's husband, Nicholas's wife, and learn just what it is that has worked well, albeit has taken a lot of time and effort, perseverance to get to where we are. Many of us can benefit from coaching. Coaching can help us overcome anything of the past and help us to live the potential that God has designed us to be. Marty and I are certified life coaches through the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. We help people to achieve their highest potential, to help them overcome anything that might be an inhibitor to living your full potential. Contact us at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. Let's schedule a complimentary 30-minute coaching session through which we can help you determine if we are the right people to help you live your very highest potential, to achieve something very comparable to what Nicholas has achieved. Through that coaching, we can help you live your fullest potential, help you achieve the heights of success, to help you know that you can do whatever it is you choose to set your mind to. We hope we can warrant a 5-star rating with this podcast series. We hope we can earn your endorsement. We hope you'll want to share this podcast with your Facebook friends, your LinkedIn connections, your Twitter and Instagram communities. The more we share, the greater the opportunity we'll have to advance others, learn from others, be able to adapt to others, help each other achieve the greatest potential that God has designed us to have. As we work together, we too can experience the height of the achievements that as Lois is achieving with Nicholas and is achieving those life-satisfying events. The more we work together, the greater we can help others. Let's work together. We look forward to working with you.